Released by Square Enix in 2015 on the PC and PlayStation 3 and 4, Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward would receive 5 content updates covered here with patch 3.1 through 3.56 story content. The story only gets larger from here, so let's cut it down to size with a recapitation. As the chapter begins, Alphinaud and Tataru continue their search with the Warrior of Light for their missing comrades as they hear a student of Baldesion is on their way to help them. They are then called in by Sir Emmerich, who says he has been filling in for the Archbishop since the seat's vacancy, and discusses how a frightened and confused public is not taking to the truth about the war or the society all too well. Many outright deny it still, criticize the manner in which the Archbishop was stopped, or harass the clergy of the city, sometimes violently. The Lord Commander believes the best way to show the war is over is to publicly make peace with the dragons, starting with talking to Vidofnir, who says they will discuss it with Hraesvelgr first. Leaving them be, Alphinaud and the adventurer rendezvous with Y'shtola in Idleshire, who introduces them to Kryl, a Sharlayan scholar hailing from their motherland who not only already knows Alphinaud, but comes ready with embarrassing tales of his school days. Right away, Kryl believes she can trace where Thancred was teleported to by Y'shtola with the help of Master Matoya's Crystal Eye relic. Visiting the witch, Kryl relates how the Isle of Val was obliterated by some powerful magic, and thanks to her possessing the Echo was able to survive. She adds that her order is devoted to studying Hydaelyn, her will and her gifts, and this is how she met and befriended Minfilia. Revealing the Crystal Eye is actually a crystal of light from an earlier age more powerful than the crystals of this age, she adds her unique Echo ability allows her to communicate with any being besides beasts. Picking up where the elementals left off and tracing Y'shtola, they learn he was sent to the foot of some all, learning from the Vath there is someone who matches his description who trades with them and recently went to pursue the primal Ravana as the Nath have summoned him again. Hurrying to the Nath Hive, they arrive only to find Ravana already felled by a strangely iconic party of adventurers dressed in black. Seeing their leader bears an uncanny resemblance to their own Warrior of Light, both warriors also have their echo powers resonate with each other, as the adventurer sees the party once fought to save their world by defeating the Ascians with their powerful light. The Dark Warrior recognizes the Warrior of Light and mocks them before blitzing the group with a united attack, catching them off guard. Cutting them off, Thancred intercepts the Dark Warrior, fending him off, as their attacker introduces his group as the Warriors of Darkness, promising to meet again. Both parties withdraw, as the group is glad to find their friend again, as Thancred wishes Y'shtola would have warned him he was going to be teleported without his clothes. When he heard of a primal appearing, he figured the signs would show up as well, but now it seems there is a new primal slaying group in Eorzea. Though they find it awfully suspicious, this group seems to have appeared suddenly out of nowhere. Updating Thancred on the situation, they return to Vidofnir, who relays Hraesvelgr approved making an effort to walk beside Man again, with Vidofnir as their ambassador. Back in Ishgard, tensions run high as many think Emmerich ran a coup and is guilty of patricide, the Lord Commander is stabbed in the street, slander against House Fortom spreads, and fundamentalists would rather burn their own city down than see it change, setting fire to several homes across the city in the high and low quarters. Seeking the instigators of these attacks, they observe the Vault clergy are providing shelter and meals to those displaced by the attacks as Thancred outwits an arsonist for a lead. As it turns out, the true Brothers of the Faith congregation have seized the Vault by force, hold the refugees hostage, demand a new Archbishop be appointed, and Emmerich be executed for patricide and high treason. Refusing to negotiate with those terms, Emmerich instead leads a group to rescue the hostages, joined by the Scions and Artoirel. Falling to their raid, the cornered Vault priest desperately dangles a child over a ledge, declaring Emmerich a blasphemer for making peace with the dragons and tossing her over to her death. Just in time, Vidofnir flies in and saves the child, landing her safely, as the ambassador happened to arrive at this moment bearing the urgent warning that Nidhogg is rallying his armies again. All the same, to witness a dragon swoop down and save a child that was about to be murdered by the clergy pauses many of the citizens, though does little to resolve their divide. To the side, Y'shtola notices Thancred can no longer manipulate ether and thus cannot cast magic anymore, as later Artoirel gifts the Warrior of Light a proper shield with their house emblem on it as gratitude. With it, he privately reveals his father intends to step down as head of House Fortom, which will absolve their house of suspicion and secure the support of the other houses. Meanwhile, in a mysterious library, Urianger is met by Elidibus and the Warrior of Darkness, telling him to prepare to take action, while a certain Scion spies on. Elsewhere, Ida and Papalima are actually in Little Alamigo, aiding a resistance faction called the Masks and preparing for a strike against the Imperials, as the mage has a bad feeling about it, reminding her they have duties elsewhere too. In the wake of recent church controversy, the Warrior of Light finds themselves inside the cathedral scholasticate, helping a student recover a tome and meeting with an appreciative sister. She stresses that though the church's teachings have been called into question and strained the relationship between the people and the clergy, those in the Scholasticate feel this is an opportunity to clear up many misconceptions and misinterpretations of the scriptures that were there, as the late Archbishop was narrow on a single interpretation. They are open to reevaluating the teachings, especially since many still promote good values and wisdom, but their students now face harassment from those who would rather purge the city of the church entirely. A mystery regarding a missing statue piece opens as a timely Inspector Briardine arrives to accept the case, as it turns out he is the deputy headmaster's nephew. The case puts them in contact with a student the adventurers saved earlier named Theo, as well as Briardine's little sister Blazy, who has a crush on Theo. Meeting with the headmistress, the adventurers ask to be an observer alongside Briardine, as many of the students wish to promote the principle of social equality as advocated in their very scriptures, but when a student goes missing, the inspector and adventurer find they have a kidnapping case to solve as well. As they find and rescue her, they deduce the mastermind is a false priest who has worked in the nation's shadow group, disgusted with having to know the truth and forced to bury it for so long, and wishes to dismantle the Scholasticate. Theo inspires everyone to adhere to the points of the scripture that also support progressing everyone forward together, with a sincerity and perseverance that persuades even former rivals and students. Thanking the Inspector and the Warrior of Light for their help, Theo leads the next generation of hopeful academics for the city, as the adventurer hears a disturbing rumor in Gridania. The seal upon the lost city of Amdapor weakens, which is all that remains of a magical advanced civilization from the 5th Astral Era, with no record on how it met its demise. The elementals tell the Seedseers they think an insatiable, unclean presence is the cause, as beyond the decay and mold of the city, the adventurer is surprised to find a powerful void scent named Diablos. Dispelling the demon and contending with the security the ancient white mages built to repel their enemies, the void mages of Mach, they glimpse at the scale of the bygone war of the Magi. Later, Amdapor Keep, though cleansed of cultists, now has a powerful void sense servant called Ferdiad who attempts to continue the corruption but is put down by the adventurer. The attention of the Warrior of Light is called skyward again, as they see a dashing sky pirate called Red Bill Leoford fly in on his own mana cutter, quickly putting down any sky pirate who breaks the code. Leoford reveals he knows of the Warrior of Light as well as the Ironworks where he also got his mana cutter, and actually wishes to employ the savvy adventurer for a venture he has in mind. Escorted to the Red Bill hideout by Leoford's second-in-command Stacia, the Warrior of Light overhears a rival pirate captain, Radlia of the Talon Pirates, wish to team up for an upcoming expedition into a ghost ship, but be rejected due to her murderous nature. Leoford explains the drifting vessel might be a relic left behind by the Alligans, landing on the ship, but finding it full of nightmarish void scent led by Diablos. Tactically taking down Kukule and Echidna, the adventurers fail to stop Diablos from breaking the seal on a massive ominous coffin as they are told to escape by a strange cat-like creature. Fleeing the demonic derelict, they find more seals break apart as the main front cannon opens up and releases a powerful beam, opening a dimensional gate. They then watch as Diablos moves the giant coffin out of the ship and through the rift beyond their reach. Landing, they are robbed of the compass they used to find the ship by Radlia, but not before Leoford plants a bug on it. Turning to the curious cat, it introduces itself as Ketchi, sharing the ship they fled was called the Void Ark and explaining it hails from the city of Mach. The Void Mages of Mach were a powerful faction in the War of the Magi, using their mastery of destructive magic against the cities of Amdapor and Nim. Their clash would end in a catastrophic flood that drowned Eorzea, later called the Sixth Umbral Calamity, though their High Void Mage Cessair foresaw this and the Machi built arcs to flee into the sky. Ketchi adds the reason there are so many void scent on the craft is because they were used as an energy source to keep the ship flying, as enslaving demons was fundamental to the rapid acquisition of terrifying destructive power the Machi sought. At the very heart of the arc, the Void Mages entombed the Void Scent's ruler, the Shadow Queen Skahak, and appointed Cessair to seal and control her. Unfortunately, hundreds of demons would escape, prompting Cessair alongside 53 other Void Mages to sacrifice themselves to seal all of them again inside their coffins, as Cessair assigned her familiar Ketchi to watch over the prison. Leoford points out the Sixth Umbral Era was more than 1500 years ago and wonders why this prison break occurred now, and Ketchi replies because Diablos returned, stronger than before, shattering every seal it passed. The Warrior of Light replies they fought Diablos before, and Leoford adds he cares less about saving the realm and more about freeing the skies of demons, and both agree to help. Later, the Talons return, begging for help as the compass led them to different ruins, where the Void Scent slaughtered their crew and Radlia was captured. Ketchi recognizes the ruins to be the old city of Mach itself, thinking the demons are after the Nullstone to prevent it from being used against them. Elaborating, Ketchi explains that Void Scent require the help of a mage in this dimension in order to manifest, often in the form of a pact. The Nullstone bound all demons to their contracts, and should any Voidsent break the terms, the Mage could use the Nullstone to obliterate the demon, no matter how powerful. Leoford is excited to race for such a treasure, and if they find the opportunity, maybe save Radlia too. The receded flood has left the city a swamp as the group overcomes a powerful ancient defense mechanism called Ozma still working 15 centuries later, and the demonic wood sprite Califisteri. Claiming the Nullstone, they are interrupted by the laughter of Ferdiad, holding Radlia hostage in exchange for the relic, but thanks to Leoford's bluffing, Ketchi has the time to turn the relic into a staff and burn the Voidsent, forcing him away. Safely back at base with treasure and more, Ketchi states he hasn't mastered the relic, which is why the demon was not destroyed, and Radlia hands them an ancient tome she found that inspired her to chase the Void Ark and its power, though it led to the loss of her crew. Inspecting the tome, Ketchi confirms its authenticity and secrets regarding the Nullstone, including the revelation that his master Cessair was the first one to summon Diabolos. Originally intended as a bluff of power, Cessair never intended the demon to be weaponized against Amdapor like the Maki did, and when she voiced her opposition was branded a traitor and imprisoned on the Ark. Through Diabolos, the Maki learned how to summon Skahawk and bind her, but when the disastrous flood was impending, they ended up begging Cessair to take control of the Void Ark and save them. Ketchi suspects Diabolos taught the Maki flawed arts on purpose all along to trick them into summoning his queen while he would still be able to free her in this dimension. Thanks to the tome, the familiar now knows how to erase Diabolos permanently, but a sudden commotion outside draws them out as Diabolos ambushes Ketchi and steals the Nullstone staff before quickly escaping. Radlia arrives with new recruits as reinforcements, eager to pay back her debt and get revenge for her lost crew, pursuing Diabolos with her own flagship and beating down Deathgaze along the way. Chasing him to the abandoned haven the Maki were to flee to, they defeat Ferdiad for the last time within the empty sanctuary city. Beyond, the group sees Skahawk herself released, resisting the Shadow Queen's gloom and defeating her, as Diabolos commends them and declares himself the master of Shadow now. Showing the Warrior of Light the gravity of the situation, it ascends into a new form thanks to claiming the Shadow Queen's power. Leoford seizes an opportunity to crash his ship into the demon, knocking away the staff, and Ketchi unleashes the Nullstone's full power, unmaking the Voidsent for good. As the skies are now free again, Leoford is glad they are all back in one piece as he accepts Ketchi as a new member of his crew, parting ways with the Warrior of Light and going merrily into the next adventure. Called back to Idleshire, Kryl mentions she has a new lead on Minfilia, noticing that Y'shtola's flow spell actually included a third person, and the ether signature involves Hydaelyn's divine intervention, thinking the Mother Crystal guided Minfilia into the teleportation effect, using it to summon her body and soul back to the ethereal sea. With Matoya's help, they enter the inverted anti-tower and defeat the creepy construct Calcabrina within, as the Warrior of Light can hear the Mother Crystal here and is summoned before her. They are brought before a being that introduces itself as the Word of the Mother, once called Minfilia, and is now a shared existence with Hydaelyn. She shares the truth of their world, starting with how before there was life, light and dark were one in the ethereal sea. However, the darkness coveted power which broke the balance, so the light banished them, but in doing so, the barrier between planes fell and their light was split into 13 reflections. Zodiark, her dark counterpart, wished to be made whole and so sent his followers to tear down the barriers to the source, and each of the world's calamities marks of rejoining. So far, 7 times has the darkness succeeded in growing towards Zodiark's resurrection, as she urges the Warrior of Light to defeat the Ascians, but runs out of energy to continue the story. Returning, the adventurer tells everyone Minfilia is no more and is now the voice of the Mother Crystal, giving her strength to Hydaelyn, who has grown too weak to speak for herself. Alphino is shocked and dismayed to learn this, but Matoya reminds him this is war, and if he intends to win, needs to be willing to do what it takes, even if it means killing or dying yourself. Y'shtola adds the Ascians have shown as much resolve and thus continue to triumph as they leave to process this development. Returning to Ishgard, the adventurer meets with Emmerich, who is arranging a formal peace conference with Vidofnir and anticipates disruption, either from Nidhogg or Ishgardian zealots who agree with the actions and ideas of the True Brothers. Taking place at the Ishgard-Dravanian border in Falcon's Nest, the adventurer sees preparations underway for the ceremony, but Lucia and Artoirel step out to make sure some holdouts in the ranks do not open fire at their incoming dragon guests. Amanelaine is also there, doing a lax job of guarding the tavern, and invites the adventurer to kick back while his older brother is away. The Warrior of Light is tended to by an eager maid who gives him a free drink, telling him she can hardly believe they are making peace with the dragons that killed her husband. Suddenly, the world spins as the adventurer is knocked out from the drugged drink as the maid spits on their actions so far, forcing everyone outside. Joined by other citizens, too bitter to forgive and forget the past and their loss, the maid proclaims this is all a trap and the dragons intend to kill them all. Seeing her trigger fear and anger among the crowd, Amanelaine panics and orders an archer to do something about the maid. Shot in the arm, the Mage uses this as proof the Highborn mean to deceive and kill all who disagree, dooming the city to death from either dragon or nobleman. A second arrow puts her down as a disapproving crowd turns to Emmanuel, who deflects blame onto the archer, only serving to martyr the Mage's message. Though the Mage would live, doubt and distrust against Emmerich and his proposed reforms only grows, and Thancred knows the people won't forget the sight of a lordling ordering the execution of an unarmed protester who was speaking what was on the minds of many. Lucia and Artoirel arrive to see the debacle, apprehending the conspirators and protesters, some of whom resist violently, as the four-time lord orders his brother to apologize to the Lord Commander in person. Amanelaine sees Onorwa was hurt during the protest, but the manservant states he actually feels bad for the protesters, still stuck in the past and refusing to let go of their misery, refusing to see the bright potential of the future ahead. Refusing to accept responsibility for his own actions, Amanelaine claims he was helpless to improve the situation, and Thancred scolds him for his pathetic excuses and victim mentality, telling him to learn to live with his choices and leaving Amanelaine to wallow in self-pity. Back in the city, Edmont laments how his foolish son only added to their challenges with solidarity, and thinking quickly, Emmerich suggests something positive to unite the people and lift their spirits, a grand melee with their Eorzean allies. Ishgard has long been a nation of warriors, and nothing would evoke nationalistic pride in their armed forces more than a friendly contest of strength against the allied nation's finest, where their side would be composed of Temple Knights and Hilda's warriors side by side. By pushing a national image of strength and unity, Emmerich knows the people's patriotism can override their pessimism and petty politics and prejudice with a small but direly needed win. Edmont agrees, volunteering Amanelaine for the front lines to give him a chance to earn honor for his shameful deeds, though his son has already started to reflect on his habit of blaming others for his problems, agreeing to fight this time on his own accord. The Warrior of Light agrees to fight for Ishgard and wear their uniform, as Raban is excited to have the chance to duel the savior of Eorzea. Clashing, the adventurer wins the final standoff against the Bull of Alamigo. Losing gracefully, the Flame General makes no excuses for his loss as the Ishgardians win, and seeing what it means to believe in a cause bigger than yourself, Amanelaine begins to see the future a bit more positively. With this symbolic victory, Emmerich rides the high to continue the peace conference as planned, even allowing the Maid and the protesters to bear witness as Vidofnir arrives. Turning to the people, Emmerich acknowledges the loss and lies that have plagued the people since the war began, knowing some scars never heal and the dead will never come back. However, as the living, they can choose to drop this hateful burden and move forward together, honoring the dead by making the peace they died for a reality for Ishgard now and for future generations to come. To remind everyone of this moment forward, Emmerich reveals a new stone seal atop Falcon's Nest depicting Shiva and Hraesvelgr happy and at peace. Approving, Vidofnir is about to speak when Estinian interrupts her, driving his spear into her back and denouncing their peace. Seeing both eyes of Needhogg fuse to him, Emmerich fires at the possessed dragoon, who is unfazed and transforms back into the Great Worm, declaring he will bring the Horde here to raise the city. The crowd cries out for the death of Needhogg as a wounded Vidofnir returns home to recuperate, and Alphino thinks for too long he has claimed to fight for the realm when really, he's more motivated to fight to save his friends. Yshtoli detects Estinian's ether is smothered by Needhogg's, but it's not entirely lost. However, there is severe risk in forcibly separating the two, as would happen if they ripped the eyes off his armor. Emmerich chimes in with Estinian compromise. The Warrior of Light alone is not enough to stop Needhogg, declaring he intends to go to Hraesvelgr personally to recruit his help. Alphino and the adventurer accompany him as he apologizes to Vidofnir for suffering an attack under his watch, though she chuckles he's not strong enough to protect a full-grown dragon in the first place. As they approach the Great Worm, he already knows the reason for their arrival and flatly refuses to fight his brood brother, reminding them his oath to Shiva is the sole reason he is not joining Needhogg in his march for vengeance. Midgard Sormer now comes out, vouching for the mortals and telling his son Needhogg is dead and this is merely a rageful shadow in his image. Considering this, Hraesvelgr admits the Phantom Menace is constructed of his own rage as well, and Midgard Sormer advises he should help clean up the problem he helped make. Pondering this, Hraesvelgr tests the Warrior of Light personally and is surprised they can weather his blows, convinced of their strength and determination, and willing to fight alongside them now to defeat his brother's dark shadow. Hearing the roar of Needhogg herald his attack, they return to Ishgard, relieving their allies who struggle to hold the line. They are shocked to see Emmerich, Alphino, and the Warrior of Light arrive on Dragonback, though all fighting pauses to watch as Hraesvelgr collides with Needhogg's shade, their mighty battle shaking the very sky. Needhogg seems to gain the upper hand, but smirking, Hraesvelgr says he simply chose to trust the Warrior of Light, revealing he gave one of his eyes to the adventurer, who steps forward to finish the dragon. Defeated in his ultimate form, Needhogg dissolves back into Estinian, who struggles to regain control of his own body. Though he tells his friends to kill him, Alphino and the Warrior of Light help him instead, tearing off the eyes with willpower bolstered by their fallen comrades. Nidhogg's spirit accepts defeat and bursts into ether as Emmerich tells the duo to toss the eyes over into the frozen ravine. Emmerich is glad to see Estinian barely breathing as Hraesvelgr approves of their alliance and thanks the Warrior of Light, parting ways for now as the horde disperses. The city cheers as Ishgard has truly defeated Nidhogg for good and the Long Dragonsong War is truly over, as a recovering Estinian thanks them for saving his life not only from his possession by Nidhogg, but also from a lifetime fueled by revenge like Nidhogg. His mission accomplished, he retires from the mantle of Azure Dragoon as Emmerich retires his seat of Archbishop leading the city, declaring a new republic for Ishgard. Governance of the city-state would now be represented by the new House of Lords and House of Commons who unanimously vote to separate church from state going forward. Emmerich himself would be voted the highest seat in the House of Lords, supported by draconic ambassadors as well, as people would hail him as the Azure Dragoon for a new age. Estinian would take a personal journey of his own, as Edmont, now enjoying his retirement, would chronicle the Warrior of Light's journey through this chapter. Wrapping up business in the city, the Warrior of Light is surprised to spot Nashu in the marketplace, who asks for their help in finding the Inspector, and doubly surprised to find Godbert discussing trade in the city with Edmont, who agrees to help. They are interrupted by Seer, an overeager inquisitor sent to hunt down a gentlemanly yet possibly heretical individual spotted in the area. Tagging along, the group finds not Hildebrand, but one of his Gentle Dead Men followers, who is indeed gentlemanly and possibly heretical. Fortunately, he can follow the ether trail of the real Inspector, and they find the lost gentleman, who was plucked up with a strange doll in hand. Though Godbert repairs the doll, it has lost all memory, and Seer thinks it may be potentially heretical and so follows it for observation. Hildebrand thinks the mammoth may be a real boy, adopting it and naming it Gigi, though while touring the city, they find Gigi has the incredulous ability to rewind time for objects. Acknowledging himself to be a mammoth, Gigi asks Godbert to be made into a real boy, but has done one better and is made into a Manderville man instead. Enjoying his new form, Gigi's fun is cut short as his time powers activate again, reverting him back to his normal form, though Hildebrand encourages him form doesn't matter, for in his heart and actions he is a Manderville mammoth. Back in the city, Seer says Hildebrand can make himself useful and solve the case of the Heavensward imposters in the city, conning people out of money, and their clues lead them to Idleshire. As it turns out, Hildebrand is friends with the goblin there who helped establish the city, claiming the Inspector is practically a founding father, and in gratitude gives them the charlatan's estate as a residence. Gigi loves their new home, and it's not long before the imposters are found to be geriatric knights who seek to relive the glory days, declaring their target was the magical mammoth all along, capturing Gigi and slowly getting away, probably. Moderately walking in pursuit, the group learns from the old knights that Gigi is actually Vivi, a creation of a Charlian archmagus Quan, made to turn back time and make himself young. However, when Vivi's magic failed to do so, Quan cast him away and died alone, but the knights say they can show him how to unlock his true potential and perhaps even restore Quan back to life. Vivi chooses to follow the knights as Seer looks into their story and learns Quan was a scholar studying ancient elegant magic, though Seer is surprised to be accused himself of heresy just for reading forbidden tomes in the archives as part of his investigation. Looking in a mirror, Seer is tired of looking for heresy in everything he sees, wasting time and energy on pointless pursuits and ignoring the truth in the process. He quits the Inquisition, but not the case, learning the senior knights are in Zenith as the group finds the over-the-hill trio have succeeded in restoring their youth. Seer explains this is bad, as it means Vivi is expending too much ether and will burn out, and the Inspector adds the knights intend to slay Nidhogg, not knowing the Warrior of Light already did so, and so likely mean to slay Hraesvelgr. Seeing the trio indeed back in their prime, they don't care the war is over, intending to kill the Great Worm, consume its eye, and give rise to a new era of glorious war. They first beat down Hildebrand with a sort of but not really Knights of the Round attack, and Vivi declares his true powers is to restore things to their ideal form. Yet he's unable to affect the Inspector like the Knights, and Seer thinks this explains why he couldn't de-age Archmagus Quan, because for Vivi, that was his ideal form. He adds that from his writings, Quan learned to love Vivi and gave up his pursuit of youth, erasing Vivi's memories before he died so as to free his creation. Realizing his life is his own story to write, not a purpose for someone else to give him, Vivi uses all of his magic to not only save Hildebrand from being crushed by the Knights, but restore them back to their proper age. Defeated by age, the Knights surrender, admitting growing old isn't so bad in its own right, but they see Vivi has spent all of his power dropping limp. Furious at losing her chance to become young again, Hildebrand's mother knocks him away so far east he can already see the next expansion's hub city. Another case resolved, Godbert says not to worry as Vivi's core is still intact, and so he merely converts the mammoth to a more convenient form to continue its travels on its own. Seer decides to start living for himself too, taking a liking to the Inspector life and pursuing the truth of things, becoming something of a gentleman himself. While in Ishgard, the Warrior of Light is spotted by Francel, who thanks him again for when he and Orshifon saved him from false accusations. Now he is the overseer for the restoration project, rebuilding the districts and asking for the savior of the city to provide input. Soliciting the wants and needs of the locals, they see many familiar faces, including a Manolane still hitting on Francel's sister, the captain of the Rose Knights. Edmont makes a social call, reminding this reconstruction as an opportunity to rebuild the city in a manner that befits its new republic status, including being more open to independent adventurers. The lower quarter residents are rewarded for moving into the better accommodations with work opportunities and tax relief to the less fortunate, and the various businesses in all 4 high houses are glad to provide supply and labor to help the development. Later on, a former Ishgardian turned Dravanian appears at the gate of the city, wishing to enter and meet with his wife and child, and Francel reminds wary inquisitors they are allied with the dragons now and may not attack those accused of heresy out of hand without fair trial. Allowing the Dragon Man to speak, he says he was a follower of Iceheart whose transformation was so slow the war was already over and never participated in the battle. Also unable to revert back, he befriended the small dragon next to him, who advised he go back to his family. The Inquisitor is not quick to believe their story without proof, but the adventurer points out he has no proof of wrongdoing either, so punishment and obstruction is uncalled for. Francel vouches for them, but the wife isn't pleased at how hard he will make her life in the city now. The small dragon is eager to tour the city and meet friendly humans, mentioning it is a direct descendant of Ratatoskr, and adding there are dragons not ready to accept humans, just as there are humans wary of dragons in their city now. Concerned citizens approach Francel and he replies he too lost family to dragons and heretics in the war, but asks them to reserve judgment for now and at least give them a chance. The Dragon Man shares how he used to be a craftsman, and having an idea to show the citizens over telling, Francel suggests he directly aid in the reconstruction with his skills, which does quell the doubters. The older among them confess it's easy for the young to be more open-minded because they didn't live in the times where this prejudice was the norm, and though it's not easy to let go of decades of emotional baggage, they admit it's not too late to change one's mind or reciprocate kindness. His wife sees he is still the man he used to be despite his appearance and is also willing to try forgiving him. Moving on, Francel helps facilitate expanded foreign trade in the firmament with the unlikely help of House Durandare, who harbors disdain for outsiders ever since he lost his son and heir to pirates at sea. Tasting his own medicine under the scrutiny of mistrustful merchants in Gridania, Count Charlemagne observes better diplomacy and negotiation with Francel, seeing him melt the cold-hearted reputation of businesses in Ishgard. Surprisingly, the sociable Amandaline shows up in Ul'dah, displaying more tact with the rumor mill and information trade to Ishgard's benefit, sharing his skills to also win over merchants. Humbled by his peers, the stubborn Count tries humility and manners to the sailors he begrudges in Limsa Lominsa, and this is noticed by the captain of the Krakens, who is secretly the Count's lost son. He is surprised his father has changed so much, as has Ishgard, and is willing to give them a chance in trade, albeit without his father knowing he is alive, much less involved. Returning to Ishgard, Durandare has new respect for House Islenar and thinks they may be the best leaders to transform society going forward, repeating one must adapt or be left behind in the past. As culture is now allowed to thrive beyond religious or militaristic interests, the citizens of the city celebrate the completion of the firmament with a festival of art and music, with an onstage musical performance by the Warrior of Light himself, ushering in a brighter future for the city. Later, the adventurer returns to the Rising Stones where a masked stranger named Anukulhai warns them of the rise of true icons, not the primals they call icons. Urianger enters to elaborate these elder icons are the ones that fought the Allagan Empire and prompted the Alec to invent ways to capture the gods. 3 such beings, called the Warring Triad, are in the research facility in Azys Law, and the Warrior of Light's battle with the Archbishop weakened the seal on them. Not wishing to unleash 3 angry gods on the world, they return to Azys Law to their first target, Sephiroth, also called the Fiend and the world's first sacred tree. Needing to remove their restraints before eliminating them, Y'shtola and Urianger help distract the Imperial presence on the island as Anukulhai mentions he cannot fall under primal influence, and together they vanquish the first god. However, Urianger is concerned the magically inept Imperials are somehow unraveling his own magic barrier so easily, but Y'shtola is more curious how the Masked Boy's master is aware of unheard of Allagan secrets such as Genesis Expression, which can create something from nothing. Running into the Legatish, they clash as the adventurer is victorious, and surrounded, the Imperial wonders why they oppose the Emperor's mission to end the primal threat to the realm. Anukulhai replies that no one man should have all that power, and Urianger reminds him what happened when the White Raven was power tripping as well. The Legatus retreats for now, and afterwards Urianger confronts Anukulhai on being the one to not only drop his first barrier, but also lure the Legatus here and get the Warrior of Light to kill him. While the Scion doesn't have a problem with the boy's objective, he does have a problem with his methods, warning him about being so untrustworthy around his allies. The masked boy admits Urianger's suspicions are true, including the fact that they too possess the Echo Power, though their gift is different from the adventurers or Kryles. Moving on, Anukulhai reveals on another world they used a stone called Auracite to contain the power of primals, though each use bled primal energy insomuch that with each victory, they gradually change into ether-hungry fiends themselves. Eventually, they warred over their world's diminishing life force until nothing remained, and his master sent the boy to this world to make sure the same tragedy did not happen here. Focusing on the matter at hand, the icon Sophia, aka the goddess, is marked for destruction next, though as they seek it out they are halted by a group of worshippers who think the party is Allegan, telling them the goddess has awakened. Hurrying to the next containment facility, they find the icon has awakened, more powerful than the god before, but the group is still able to destroy her. They also learn some Imperial soldiers wandered too close and became the enthralled they encountered, as Anukulhai moves to terminate all of her servants, even the ones in stasis. Moving on, the boy explains the Allegans were not just observing the icons and siphoning their power, their spherical prisons were prototypes for their next project, the construction of the artificial moon Dalamud. With only one pillar left to topple, Zervan the demon, they find Von Hydrus has returned with more soldiers. However, he reports that upon seeing the Allegan prisons fail in their duty to constrain icons, he deems them unworthy of the Emperor's attention and wishes to aid the Scions in the destruction of the icon and its thralls. Forming an uneasy alliance, the Legatus covers for them as his men fend off the Beastmen thralls and even saves Anukulhai's life. Attempting to block a direct hit from the icon, even Von Hydrus falls to the overwhelming strike, telling the boy never to hesitate in battle and is glad to die in service of the Emperor who was his childhood friend, urging them to kill all primals. Defeating the final icon of the Warring Triad, the group thanks the late Legatus and his forces for their help, and Anukulhai once again reflects on his weakness. Returning to the Rising Stones, he unmasks himself while explaining he is not from this world and was born with an echo power too weak to save his dying world. Unable to become a warrior of light, his world is now what they call the Void, falling to darkness after the heroes who tried to save the world with Auracite instead became fiends who consumed the last of its ether. In fact, every void-sent demon they encounter here was once a mortal from his world, now a twisted remnant, and he reveals his master who saved him from his doomed world was none other than the Ascian Elidibus. From him he learned of the mirrored worlds and the eternal struggle between light and dark, as too much of either will shatter the balance and doom the world back into the void through a calamity. He adds that Elidibus considers himself a custodian of this balance, mentioning the Source, the first of all worlds, now slips closer to oblivion too, something the Scions already know. Anukulhai declares he will save this world even if he's not as strong as the Warrior of Light, and telling him he is not alone anymore in this endeavor, Y'shtola welcomes him in as a member of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. Meanwhile, while the adventurer was away, one of the Warriors of Darkness would survey the side of the discarded Nidhogg eyes as the Warrior of Darkness speaks with Elidibus, catching their eavesdropper Alize, who was saved by Thancred, who was shadowing both of them. However, as they fled, the Dark Bard of the group would shoot her with a poisoned arrow, and Thancred would carry her back to Ishgard. Weekly, Alize shares that the Warriors of Darkness are working with the Ascians, and killing all primals is the first step in their plan, targeting Garuda next. Mobilizing on this information, they hurry to stop the summoning, succeeding before the Warriors of Darkness arrive themselves. Alphinaud demands to know their intentions, and openly, the Warrior of Darkness reminds them of how there are 13 worlds, each a reflection of the Source, and each with a shard of light and dark. Their home was the world closest to the Source, dubbed the First, and they were heroes blessed with the Mother Crystal's light. However, their world was imbalanced with too much light, so much so that the Ascians that invaded were no match and fell one by one. They thought they were victorious, but then the pure light came and flooded their world, annihilating all color, shadow, and life itself, as it now teeters on the brink of destruction. Alphinaud refuses to believe the light could be so cataclysmic, but the Warrior of Darkness reminds them such an event has happened to the 13th world, which was swallowed by the dark and turned into the Void. Seeing no other way to save their world, they joined forces with the Ascians and came to this world to begin the Ardor, wherein they seek to break down the barriers between planes with calamitous destruction and see their worlds rejoined. Alphinaud doesn't understand how dooming this world saves theirs, but not willing to talk more, the warriors all take their leave, except for one tall masked member who takes a long pause before leaving too. Returning to Ishgard, Alize shares during her tailing of the Warriors of Darkness, she learned they slay primals to drive societies into such desperation that they summon more powerful gods instead. The Ascians fuel this desperation, and the Warriors of Darkness harvest it, and for now they think to at least limit the supply chain of crystals to the Beast Tribes, so they lack the means of summoning that way. Outfitted in new fashion thanks to Tataru, Alize rejoins the Scions as they pray return to the Waking Sands to speak to Urianger on any word of primal activity. Their ally shares that the kobolds are seeking to summon Titan again, and before leaving to check this, Alisaie leers at Urianger, finding his silence on the Warriors of Darkness awfully suspicious, and asks them to research into the Ardor in the meanwhile. On their way to investigate the kobolds, they encounter a child kobold who reaches out to them for help, confirming their leader aims to summon Titan, but instead of just using crystals, they would also use live sacrifices, fearing for their parents. Sneaking in and stealing their supply of crystals, Alphinaud notices the crates were all shipped from Ishgard and finds they are too late to save the young kobold's parents. The kobold leader says the blood sacrifice ensures a more powerful version of their god, which they need because the big cities always drop their peace agreements with beast tribes at their earliest convenience when they want more of their land and resources. However, the distress of the child kobold is what ends up summoning a berserk version of Titan who attacks the kobolds as well, who is fortunately premature and weak and so quickly put down again. Elsewhere, the Masked Man tells the Warrior of Darkness instead of playing the Ascians' long game, why not strike down the Warrior of Light and immediately plunge this realm into chaos, and the Warrior agrees. As the group returns to Urianger, he tells them through reading the Garen oracles, every umbral calamity signifies the ruin and loss of one of the parallel worlds. He adds that should the Warriors of Darkness succeed in rejoining their world to the Source, everyone will die and be returned to the Source to be reborn, but that it's far more preferable than letting it fall into a void where they would know neither life nor death. Finally, he adds a large shipment of supplies has been delivered to Little Alamigo, likely for the intent of summoning their patron deity, Rhalgr. The supplies appear to be remnants of Aline spies in Ishgard, and the group moves out to Little Alamigo to see what's going on. Just then, they receive a message from Thancred saying they just discovered the next shipment of crystals is going to Little Alamigo, courtesy of smugglers that used to work for Aline, and Alisaie finds it awfully suspicious Thancred has told no one this information, and yet they were just informed the same by Urianger. Alphinaud believes in Urianger, remembering he was one of Louisoix's most dedicated pupils and spent so much time at the estate with himself and Alisaie he was practically family. Over in Little Alamigo, Gundobald mentions someone called the Griffin being the leader of the Masks, the top faction in the Resistance. Attending one of Griffin's speeches, they see he is serious about sparking a war with the Garleans, but the pair are shocked to see Papalymo and Ito there as well. Glad to finally reunite with the last of their scattered scions, the adventurer learns the pair are helping out the Resistance to pay back the favor of them smuggling them out safely out of Ul'dah earlier and taking care of them since. Unfortunately, communication to outsiders is limited, and the Griffin specifically does not want the meddling of the scions, so they were unable to reach out earlier. Papalymo adds the Griffin they just saw is not the real one, just a public impersonator, and the real Griffin stays secret and refuses to let anyone get close. Hearing the real Griffin intends to summon a primal to challenge the Empire, Papalymo and Ito wish to stop this, but after cornering the imposter, he reveals they are giving the crystals to the Amalja so they can summon their god, in exchange for fighting with the Alamigan resistance. Turning to the Warrior of Light, the false Griffin thanks the adventurer, saying many in their resistance were saved by him and inspired by the Warrior of Light's example of how much of a difference one person can make, including himself. Thanking the adventurer again for the hope and courage he inspires, the false Griffin takes his leave as Ida pauses, wanting to aid her homeland the most right now. Searching for the Amalja supply of crystals, it turns out to be a trap as the Adventurers of Darkness confront the Warrior of Light and the Scions. Declaring they intend to end the one life of the Warrior of Light in order to save an entire world, the two groups clash as Alisaie joins the fray, summoning a crystal blade of her own to fight with. However, the Warrior of Darkness would shackle the entire group with magic chains, preparing a critical blow, but their bonds would be shattered by the Masked Man in the group. Revealing himself to be a double agent, the Masked Man is Urianger, stating he does not believe allowing their world to die is the only way to save it. Undeterred, the Warrior of Darkness turns to his group's Black Mage for top DPS to end the fight, and while the Mage charges up, Alisaie says if they channel Ether into her Crystal Blade, she can strike them all down in one fell swoop. Trusting in her plan, she banishes the darkness in a single swing, though somehow the Warriors of Darkness still yet live. Smirking, they reveal their secret is the same means by how they arrived on this world, showing them their own crystals of light, jumping between planes just like the Ascians do with their own crystals of darkness. Alphinaud points out the Ascians can only cheat death that way by surrendering their bodies, and nodding, the Warrior of Darkness replies they have all already died trying to save their world before. Reflecting, he explains they were once just an ordinary ragtag group of adventurers, never aspiring to become Warriors of Light, but through their many victories and glory do the people regard them as heroes and pit them against greater foes. Fighting non-stop until they literally eliminated all foes, their only reward was growing the light into erasing their world. He knows the Warrior of Light can relate to trying anything to save their world, as they take out their crystals and invoke their power. The adventurer does the same, and between their power, both groups are brought to Hydaelyn's realm, where Urianger offers a bounty of their light in order to gain an audience with her mouthpiece, Minfilia. Appearing before them, the Word tells the Warriors of Darkness she knows their pain and sacrifice, but assures them that though the First World is blinded by light, it is not yet absolutely lost. Rather, she tells them she will travel to their world and relieve it of the overwhelming light, but insulted, the Warrior of Darkness spits back that she waits until now to actually do something, trying to strike her but is easily halted. Minfilia now speaks as herself, saying just as there are agents of Zodiark, so too does Hydaelyn have her own instruments, and for the bounty of light the First will give the Mother Crystal, Minfilia has been given enough strength to be set free and act as her emissary. The Warrior of Darkness settles down after hearing his world will be saved after all, and Minfilia turns to greet her friends after so long. Urianger says this was his plan after talking with the Ascians and learning of Minfilia's fate, figuring it would work though it would require Minfilia to leave this world likely forever. As was said before, one life for one world, and he apologizes for using her like this, though she says it is a price she is glad to pay. She gifts the Warrior of Light Tupsamati, as the Warrior of Darkness asks Minfilia to take them all with her back to their home. She agrees, and before they leave, the Warrior of Darkness tells his counterpart light and darkness don't matter, only how you use them, and urges him to learn from their choices, and forge a different path and seize a better fate for this world. Minfilia thanks them all for their time together and sends her mother a message of gratitude as well as the two groups part ways. Back on their world, they update Papalymo and Ida on what happened as they return to the Scions proper, and Kryl says while she accomplished what she came for, she'll stick around with them a bit longer. Papalymo asks for Tupsamati, having a feeling he'll need it, and they entrust the relic to him as elsewhere, Elidibus meets with a true griffin, saying a world becoming a void is no use to his master, and so will be watching Hydaelyn's new emissary with great interest. He now presents Griffin with Needhog's two eyes encased in ice, telling him to use this icicle to accomplish his revenge. Back in the Rising Stones, the Scions are interrupted by an Alamegan resistance member named Monago, who relays news that the Griffin intends to assault Baelzar's wall, even though there is no way their small force could hold the wall against Imperial reinforcements. All the same, the leaders of the Alliance are informed, as when the adventurer informs his friend Emmerich in Ishgard, he also sees a Mannerling has grown up a bit, now garrison commander of Camp Dragonhead where Orshafon serves, motivated to earn his brother's office. As the Alliance leaders meet, they recall how their three grand companies struggled against a single Imperial legion, and thus think to have forces stand by in Gridania in case the conflict spills into the Black Shroud, or if the Imperials think to turn this reclamation into an opportunity for invasion. Ishgard promises actual military support this time, and the Doman Shinobi pledge to help where they can. As the Scions join the standing army to observe Griffin's attack, they are shocked to hear the resistance members are all wearing Grand Company colors and uniforms. It suddenly strikes Alphino this was Griffin's real plan all along, to make it seem like the Alliance was declaring war, and with their standing army there on the border will make the ruse all the more believable. At the same time, this could all be a diversion for Griffin to slip into Alamigo and incite rebellion against the Imperial occupation, but either way they have fallen for the Griffin's trap and need to stop him. Fighting their way across the battlefield, they confront the Griffin, who turns out to be their fugitive traitor Ilberd, inviting them to see what waits at the far edge of fate, and constantly calling out their sloppy fighting. Defeated anyway, he may have lost this duel, but they cannot stop what he started, pointing them to the resistance members winning the siege on the wall. To the side, a confident Yu Yu Hase and a nervous Laurentia stage an Imperial reprisal, activating several war machines that swarm the resistance and mercilessly slaughter them all at the height of their fear and despair. Now taking out the frozen Needhog eyes, Ilberd states he is tired of empty promises to free Alamigo for so long and his own efforts so far so useless, intending to use the hateful death cries of his sacrificed resistance along with the ether in the eyes to summon a deity even more mighty than Bahamut. With himself as the final piece, Ilberd hurls himself off the edge, splattering himself on the floor alongside so many of his countrymen as his death sacrifice completes the ritual and a powerful primal begins to take shape. With no means to stop things now, Papalymo steps forward, thinking of one last resort, taking out Tupsamati and declaring he will do as Louis Sois did with Bahamut and create a great seal. Telling them all to escape as he buys them time, Ida denies him, but trusting in their comrade, the other Scions scoop her away and bid farewell to their friend. Declaring himself his master's greatest pupil, Papalymo completes the seal at the cost of his own life, and with no time to grieve with this chance he paid the ultimate price for, the Scions hurry to study the cocoon and decide how to deal with the primal within. Meanwhile, outside the Waking Sands, a towering samurai lands on Eorzea, spotted by Urianger. The Alliance leaders reconvene, sharing any vessels that try to get close to the cocoon are destroyed by it, and as Cid hesitates to propose a solution, Nero crashes the meeting, telling his fellow engineer they both know the answer. Smug as ever, the former Tribunus explains they only know of one force in existence that has successfully bound so powerful a primal, the elegant Godslayer Omega. Reminding them that as the genius who restored Ultima Weapon, he knows he can reactivate it without it backfiring. Cid calls out his shenanigans at the Crystal Tower, and the Seed Seer is concerned about controlling the machine once it is operational again, but the Warrior of Light feels they should work together with Nero on this. Having no better plan, the Council agrees, though Cid will lead the project and the Scions will supervise Nero. Planning their next move, they are met by the boisterous samurai, who recognizes Yugiri, introducing himself as Gosetsu, saying she is being called back to Doma to aid her master. She tells them they need to help her benefactors here with their mission first, and hearing it is action against the Empire, the samurai is glad to help. After Tataru upgrades the Warrior of Light's casual wear, they travel to Cartano, where Nero has already been preparing things, and fend off the Imperials led by an eager scout named Grainwat there thanks to Gosetsu and Nero's Magitech armor, the Red Baron. Activating Omega from stasis, the war machine immediately detects the Primal and automatically flies out to capture it just as the Primal breaks free of its shell, revealing an unfamiliar dragon. In the control room, the last of Papalymo's ether disappears with it as the Archon mark on Ida's neck disappears too. The two titans clashing, Omega is able to withstand the fearsome tidal wave attack and relentless strikes of the Serpentine foe, countering with its own charged Delta attack beam. The collision of their attacks knocks out all signals from Omega as they exchange severe blows, sending both beings flying off into distant directions. As the battle ends, the Council hears the Domans liken the dragon to the god dragon from their own country called Shinryu, and while the Alliance has captured the wall for now and secured Gridania's border, Cid affirms Omega's stasis system was triggered remotely, so even if the Empire finds it first, they won't be able to do anything with it. Emmerich points out that whether they wanted it or not, they stepped into a war for Alamigo, and suggests working with the Resistance now for that nation's liberation. Checking in with Ida as she grieves, she takes off her mask and hat, stating she cannot hide in Papalymo's shadow or behind her sister's mask anymore. Elaborating, she states that 20 years ago, when she was around 4 years old, her father was one of the revolutionary leaders to overthrow the Mad King Theodoric, and her sister helped him. After the Garleans took over, her sister took her to Charlian, where she would study under Master Louisoix and become an Archon. Ida, the real Ida, died 6 years ago fighting Imperial soldiers while smuggling refugees out of Alamigo. The other Scions knew this already, but on Papalymo's request went along with the act all this time, as she would assume her sister's name to continue what she started. Her real name is Lise, and while she didn't want to become Ida strictly speaking, she just didn't know what else to do with her life at that point. Papalymo would help her walk her own path, and with him gone, she now declares she will continue on as her true self and continue to fight to liberate Alamigo like Ida and her father did. As the chapter ends, Yugiri and Gosetsu begin their journey eastward to Doma as the imposing viceroy of Alamigo takes an interest in Shinryu, and Raoban swears to himself on Ilbert's grave that he will take their homeland back, preparing for the storm of blood to come. During this point of the game, Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward has enjoyed the success of having over 6 million players worldwide.
Thou wilt obey!
Sloppy! My pain! My longing! You shall have it all!
Now, let us see how good a student I truly was.